The following content has been provided by RWTH Aachen University.
All right, now moving on. While this was happening, sort of again in the research labs, if you like, right? This was again the vision of the future. What we just saw, the NLS system. The real world was kicking in and discovering that hey, we can make some money with computer games, right? So the very first commercially available computer game was a little space exploration thing, but Pong was the first one that actually reached a large scale and was available to a broad public. The first Pong system designed by Bushnell by Atari was basically becoming a hit on the first day. They put it in a bar somewhere in Silicon Valley, and people walked up to it, and I saw this little white dot going like beep, beep, and then you start turning the paddle, and you could actually reflect it, and somebody else would turn the other paddle, and there you were playing. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the system died of a very, very sort of iconic death the next day. It stopped working. And so people had been lining up around the block at this bar to play this game, all geeks, I guess, there. But it stopped working, and when they walked up to it, they found out what the problem was. The problem was that people had thrown in so many quarters that the coins had stacked up all the way until they shortened out the bottom of the circuit board. So they just had to take the money out, and then the system worked again. I guess that's a good problem to have. So another example of very early sort of hobbyist PCs was the Altair, right? The Altair 8800 looked like that, announced here on Popular Electronics of, I think, 1975. And this was basically a computer you could build yourself. So you get a little kit, and you could basically assemble it yourself. It had LEDs and switches for a user interface. And what you could do with this was basically put it together and then install or program it with a little game that would basically, you had to pick one of the 8 switches and flip it, and then the system would light up one of the 8 LEDs. And if you were lucky, you had guessed the right LED, and that was sort of the game. But still exciting for people who wanted to have a computer at home. The name Altair, by the way, you guys probably know where this is from. This was the planet that Star Trek was flying to during that week on the TV show. That's how they picked the name. The Altair cost $400 and had 256 bytes of memory. You could later expand it to 8 kilobytes much later, and then run a BASIC on there that some guy called Bill Gates wrote. All right, now on to personal computers. The first successful PC was introduced by Apple as the Apple II. The Apple I never really made it beyond a couple hundred builds, I guess. And the Apple II was the first general-purpose computer that was widely used in business. And why was it used? Well, not so much because you had a computer, but actually because of the software you could run on it. This was the first time that the broad public, like small businesses, were able to run something called a spreadsheet. Right? This hadn't existed until then as an application. And it was something that a lot of businesses really found game-changing. Right? For them, they could start projecting their sales and doing things like that. Then, of course, 4 years later, the IBM PC came out. That the key advance here was technology-wise, these were not very much different. But this made the PC respectable to business, because instead of being some weird, California-based company with a colorful Apple logo, this was the proper, IBM International Business Machines Corporation that a lot of businesses, especially larger businesses, knew, because IBM had been selling large-scale computers to banks and insurances and so on, and pre-computer business machines to these companies. So it made the PC as a concept respectable to business. People wanted something from IBM, because that was a respectable name, rather than this weird startup, you would say today, I guess, from Apple, which was selling their Apple II for $666, just to put a little demonic twist into their sales. Features of all these systems, of course, character terminal, Very early on, actually, we already got standards for the user interface design for these. So this is where you first see documents emerging that say this is how the user interface should look when you make up an application for this. But this was only for the text-based interfaces. So it would tell you how masks should be laid out that you created with text. As soon as it got to any kinds of graphics on these systems, it became entirely non-standardized. Here's an example of VisiCalc, which was the application that you could buy for the Apple II, and that completely sort of revolutionized or actually made the PC revolution possible in a way, because it was a completely new genre of software. And when you guys think about interface design, I would like you to think not just about pushing pixels around. I think this is a great example of true interface design because it's going much deeper than just the visual presentation. This actually, VisiCalc was a completely new class and a completely new genre of applications. Nobody had been able before VisiCalc to have rows and columns of data, be interactive, linked to each other, and actually refer to each other's cells and make prognosis and live basically compute a spreadsheet. This was completely new, a new mental model, if you like, for users, especially from small businesses, that people were able to use. But it was also a model that was very intuitive and very easy to pick up, right? You've got a cell and you've got another cell. This refers to this other one. If I change stuff here, stuff will update there. So this was quite a breakthrough. And actually, if you look at Excel today, it doesn't work that much different. I think we have a demonstration for this, so let's show that real quick. Because we were able to actually dig out a version of VisiCalc. The original one was from around, I guess it came out with the Apple II. So this one is a copy from 1979. And we now have a version that we can run for you guys that runs on DOS, so a couple of years later.
OK, so the first thing you can see here is the command line interface that we already talked about. So I can type stuff in, and once I send it, there's basically the machine doing something in the background, but I can't interact with that anymore. I would get the result back, but nothing else. So if I start VisiCalc, it looks very nice, right? And if we have a look at the version, which is up there, you can see it's from 1979. So yeah, it has some years on its back. And what I can do with the arrow keys, I can actually move this cursor around and enter text if I want to, or numbers, and basically have all these data already in a spreadsheet, which was or is similar to what people were doing with pen and paper offline, so to speak, and now they could also use it online in their computer. And what also was working, if I have some numbers in here, and what I could then do is use a command to add those up or get the average of them. Like this, to a 5. And then it automatically calculates the average of that. And notice that this is also interactive. So if I change a number here, it would automatically update the result it calculated. So now for more, let's load a file. For example, the exam results from yesterday. No, not yet, not yet, working on it. And you see this would be some mock-up data. If I need to change this number, could update the data that I have in here. But what you can see is if I move around, well, it actually it scrolls with me. So I'm not sure now, well, what is the B column meant to show. And what I would be able to do is to lock these rows or freeze them. So if I go down now, the top rows actually stay the same.
We should mention this is a purely keyboard-operated application, right?
Yes.
The Apple II didn't have a mouse or anything like that. So everything you're doing there, you're doing via special command keys to lock these things in,
Yes.
right?
Yes, you can see the command that I'm typing in the top left here. So, for example, if I want to freeze this row, I have the backslash that says basically I can enter all these letters to trigger the different commands, and T then is for the titles, and I'm not sure why B is freezing the left side of the spreadsheet. But now if I would move like this, it would also stay the same on the left. And yeah, to unlock that, use a special command again, and then you can move this around. And then what this program also had is the option to visualize your data. So for example, here I have sort of a bar graph of the data, and I can actually change this back to show me the digit value that is stored in this cell. And you see in the top there is this plus B29, which is actually then a reference to the cell that it takes the data from. And if I would here change the value, it would automatically update also in the other cells. And if I go there, I can have another format, which then goes back to the bar graph style. So and then, well, now if I have a look at that, it is, I would like to see the results or the visualization directly in this view as well, while manipulating the data. And what I would be able to do is to split.
Explain the commands
my view.
Because that's the unusual thing, right?
That was W for the window command, so to speak, and then horizontal to have a horizontal split in there. And now I have two windows, which, well, early stages of having different windows that I can interact and switch with. So with a semicolon, I can go to the second panel here and move to my summary. And if I would go to the cell we already manipulated and change it back to something, I can immediately see the update here. So that is a demo of the VisiCalc operations here. And to get back, what was that? I'm not sure. Quit? No. Store? Quit? Yes. And back again.
All right, thank you. So, I mean, you've all used Excel, so the functionality here is not something where you're like, wow, I've never seen that before. In fact, you have hopefully seen that many times since. So the point here is more, this was around in 1979, which is maybe surprising to some of you how long this stuff has been around. The second thing that I think is interesting is to see that since this didn't have a mouse, it had to use all keyboard commands. And essentially what we today have via toolbars or menu items, you in this kind of interaction, of course, have by bringing up a menu when you hit, what is it, backslash, I think, right? So backslash gets you the menu, which is then just abbreviated a couple letters, and then you choose one letter that is a mnemonic for picking, for example, the scrolling menu or something, and you set something in there. So the interactions are the second thing that I think is important to notice here, how this was basically made as a graphical application, if you like, that is really using the entire screen, but still operated entirely via the keyboard. So you need, effective commands, for example, to move between two windows, right? Because you can't just click. So that's where you had like the semicolon special key that you could use for that because it wasn't used for anything else. And the third thing that I like to, that I notice when I see this is how should I say this? This is nicely responsive, even though it is running on a Mac that is running a DOS box emulation that is then running VisiCalc. It is still sometimes feels more responsive than when I started up the latest Excel on my Mac that is from like 2015. And that's really the scary part about it, right? A lot of software gets so loaded with features, and sometimes just the basic responsiveness and the effective use of it and the simplicity of the UI really gets lost in the process.
This content was provided by RWTH Aachen University.